So, good morning, and thank you to joining at my session. In this session, I want to talk about the choice to use SharePoint framework to develop apps in Microsoft Teams. So, I'm Fabio Franzini. I'm CEO of AppV Solutions, and of course, I'm a Microsoft MVP. So, we can start with the agenda. This is some points of our journey at this section. We start to talk about what is the Microsoft Teams app, of course, and then just an introduction on the Microsoft Teams platform features. So then we can talk about on what code-based framework we can use to create application for Teams. Then we can talk about the SharePoint framework, just an introduction. And then the last slide, it's why I did choose the SharePoint framework to develop application for Teams. At the end, I have just a simple demo to show you, and then a slide with some references that you can use to learn more deeply what I explained in this session. So, what is a Microsoft Teams application? Basically, a Teams application could be a tab, a messaging extension, and a bot, okay? And basically, it's a way to host inside the client, the Teams client, both web, desktop, mobile, your application. An application could be a personal application or a team application. So the difference is the personal application work with almost with the personal data, and a team application work with the data inside a team inside a Microsoft Teams. Different kind of application, tab or messaging extension or personal application are an application that have an UI. Then the bot, it's a different kind of application, and in this case, you have an application that interact with the user by using a chat mode. It's very different from a classic application that have an UI. So, this slide show you what is the platform, the Microsoft Teams platform features. There are a very number of ways to interact or extend Microsoft Teams. To interact with Microsoft Teams, we can use the Microsoft Graph API. So you can, if you need, you can create an application that it's not a team application hosted inside the client, but on a backend application that have to interact with the Teams data, for example, or create interact with the creation, the provisioning of artifacts inside Teams. You can use the Microsoft Graph API. There are some Power Platform connectors that you can use inside the Power Apps or Power Automate and all the Power Platform services to interact with Teams. There are some connectors or webhook if you want to interact with these technologies with Teams, or you can create application hosted inside the Teams client. There are different ways. I already mentioned tabs, bot, messaging extension, or task modules. Or the last one, create in-meeting applications. So tabs, messaging extension, task modules, and in-meetings application have an application UI. But bot is on a chat-based. If you want to use inside on a chat-based application some complex UI, not only text, you can use inside the bot application. You can use one or more adaptive cards. Adaptive cards, it's a standard that it's a JSON-based format. You can create this JSON to describe the UI of your card, and then you can send a message inside your bot. So, what code-based framework you can use to create application for Teams? So it's an complex or simple, it depends your point of view question. So basically, you can use the framework that you want. You have to decide, first of all, if you want to create a solution that runs only in client-side mode, or only in the server-side mode, or mixed. Some code it's a client-side code, and some code it's a server-side code. So you can use for the client development, you can use Blazor, you can use the SharePoint framework, of course. You can use different kind of framework. You can create a React app, and then just a static app that contains the JavaScript, and then run inside the context of Teams. Or you can use different frameworks. So if you want to implement the same for the server-side code, it's the same. You can use .NET, you can use Java, you can use Python, or you can use Node.js as a server-side runtime. Of course, if you want to interact with Teams, you need to use the API, the Graph API, or some SDK implemented for server-side code or for JavaScript client-side code. Of course, there are some tools that you can use to accelerate the development of application for Teams. There are Teams Toolkit, there are the developer portal that have some part to speed up the development of your application, or you can use an open source community tool. There are more than one tool that you can use as an open source tool. So this schema is basically for all application development. So when you have to develop an application for Teams, you need to plan your application, then you have to design your application, not only for the architecture, but if it's not on a bot, or maybe it's the same for the bot, you need to design the interaction and the UI of your application. Of course, you need to build, you need to test your application, you need to extend, it's a cycle, you need to extend your application, and at the end, you need to deploy or distribute inside the Microsoft Store your application. Specifically for Microsoft Teams, we have some tools and libraries that you can use to implement this cycle. So you can use the Teams UI Kit, Teams UI Library, or Teams Toolkit. So Teams UI Kit and Teams UI Library are libraries for the UI for your application inside the Teams. It contains some controls that you can use to build the UI. There are some tools and SDK, Teams Toolkit, and the SDK specific for Microsoft Teams. You can use the Microsoft Graph. You can use, of course, the Microsoft 365 ecosystem to interact with more than one service in Microsoft 365. You can use Azure AD to register your application if you need to have a registered application with different permissions. You need a test tenant or an Azure subscription to deploy, for example, the server-side code, and then you can use the Teams Store to deploy your application, or the Microsoft Store if you want to publish your application globally. So I want to share with you why I choose SharePoint framework, but first we need to understand what is SharePoint framework. So SharePoint framework, or SPFx, it's the modern way to customize and extend SharePoint. But at this moment, SharePoint, it's not the only service that you can extend or customize. We can customize with the SharePoint framework, SharePoint Online, Microsoft Teams, and of course, the last service that Microsoft introduced, it's the Microsoft Viva connection. So with the same development model, you can create SharePoint extension or application, Microsoft Teams application, and Microsoft Viva connection extension. And this is very interesting. It's very cool for me because just one model, it's the same model. You need to create some artifact inside the SharePoint framework, and then you can deploy for use in SharePoint, Teams, and Viva connection. Of course, to work with SharePoint framework, you need to understand that you have to use some tools, some frameworks, and some code editors. So regarding the tooling, there are some tools that you can use for create a SharePoint solution. First of all, you need to use the Yeoman templates to generate, to scaffold your SharePoint solution project. Basically, you can do that manually, but it's very complex to scaffold manually on a SharePoint framework project. Then you can use Yeoman templates to generate for a specific version and for a specific kind of customization that you want to create. You can use a Yeoman template to do that. When you generate this template, inside this template there are plenty of files that contains the configuration and the implementation for your code. So for the configuration, you have some files that contains instruction to use Gulp. Gulp is a task runner for Node.js. Basically, if you want to compile or if you want to create the package to deploy for a SharePoint framework solution, you need to use a specific task for Gulp to build, to deploy, to generate, not deploy, to generate the package to deploy. All these tools need a runtime, and this runtime is the Node.js. For each version of SharePoint framework, you need to understand which Node.js runtime version is supported. And then you have to install a specific Node.js version, and then use to run Yeoman, to run Gulp, and another tools. If you want to add more than the default library that is present inside the template generated, the package generated from the Yeoman templates, you can use the npm. npm is a package manager for Node, and then you can install more than one library that you can use inside your solution. So you can use Webpack. You don't need to understand deeply Webpack if you want to create a standard solution. If you need to create complex scenario, complex library that you want to build in a different, I don't know, scenario, you need to understand Webpack. It's basically a system to collect all the compiled file and generate just one file to deploy, JavaScript file. You can use Sass to describe the style for your UI. Sass is a superset of CSS. And last but not least is the TypeScript. TypeScript is the default language for the SharePoint framework solution. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript that contains more complex syntax, more expressive syntax to generate a JavaScript JavaScript code that run inside your client, Teams client, or your browser. Regarding the web frameworks, you can use the framework that you want. You can personally I use React, but if you want to use Angular, if you want to use Vue.js, if you want to use another framework, you can do that. Why I choose React? I choose React because the Fluent UI library, both for Fluent UI React and Fluent UI Northstar. Northstar, it's the library that contains controls that Teams use natively to generate the UI of Teams. It's implemented in React. So if I want to use these controls inside on a SharePoint framework, I need to generate, for example, on a web part that use React. But there are different open source solutions that re-implement the Fluent UI style without React, and then you can use really you can use the framework that you want. Basically, for me, the good choice is to use React, but it's open to all the framework that you want to use. Regarding the code editors, I think that it's not only my choice, but the choice is to use the Visual Studio Code. Why? Because it's the most used code editor, cross-platform, open source. You can find a lot of extensions useful for SharePoint framework or on other frameworks and tools. And then for me, it's the best choice. But if you want to use a different code editors, why not? The only things that you have that you need to have on a console to run the gulp command to remember to build to package the solution, or if you want to test your solution. So when you start to develop to SharePoint framework, you need to do some you need to remember some commands. The first part is just to install the required runtimes and tools. You need to remember to install the Node.js, the npm, and then globally Yeoman, the Yeoman generator for SharePoint. The name is at Microsoft/generator-SharePoint, and then of course gulp. When you set up your environment, it's the time to start to create the first project. To create the first project, just to put the console in the folder that you want to use to create the project, and then run the command yo at Microsoft/SharePoint. At this time, the generator for SharePoint framework asks you some information: the name of the package, the name of which kind of web part you want, or different kind of customization you want to create. If you choose web part, the Yeoman generator tell you some information: the name, description, and so on. And then when you respond to the last question, the Yeoman template starts to scaffold the project and then start to install all the npm package by default inserted inside the SharePoint template for Yeoman. Then, of course, you need to create your code, and at the end, you need to remember just 3 commands. First of all, the gulp serve. The gulp serve is the command to start just the development, so to run your code in development mode. You are able to debug by using the Visual Studio Code debugger or the browser debugger, and then you can test by using a different way your solution. At the end, when you are ready to deploy inside your solution inside the SharePoint App Store or App Catalog or Teams, you need to first run the gulp bundle --ship to create the bundle, the compilation and the bundle of your all JavaScript, SAS, and all the files that you have implemented inside your solution. Just create a bundle, and then at the end, the last command is gulp package solution -c. This package solution generates a file. It's basically a zip file with a different extension that contains all the files that you have to deploy inside SharePoint app catalog. When you are ready, you have to go to the app catalog and then deploy your package. And yes, and I lost one slide. Oh my God, sorry. When you deploy the solution inside the app catalog, the last thing that you have to do is deploy and then click on the button. Later, I'll show you to deploy your package inside Microsoft Teams. I don't know why I lost one slide, but later in the demo, I'll show you this part. So basically, when you have to create an UI, an application for Teams by using SharePoint framework, you need to implement some different configurations. So basically, an app for Teams, it's a web part, and a SharePoint framework web part. Every SharePoint framework web part have a web part manifest. This is just an example of a web part manifest. And inside the manifest, you can find a property supported hosts. In this property, it's an array of string. You can put some values. For example, if you want just to create the kind of SharePoint web part type, you can put the SharePoint web part, this is the standard, or SharePoint full page. In this case, the SharePoint full page, it's the just on a single page application. It's on a web part that fill all the space inside on a web part, and inside this page you can have only this web part. But if you want to create the two type of Teams application, you can put the value of Teams tab or Teams personal app. If you put only Teams tab, your web part will be deployed just on a tab. You can add the web part as a tab inside on a channel in Teams. But if you add the Teams personal app, you are able to show the same web part as an application inside the left panel of the Teams client. Basically, it's similar to the SharePoint full page because your web part fill all the space inside the part of the client that show the personal application, and then it's very interesting to use. Of course, you need to manage regarding the configuration. Sorry, you need to manage different way to save the settings if you use the Teams tab or Teams personal app, because the Teams tab use to run on a SharePoint page, and later I show you in the demo, you are able to modify the property of your web part as a Teams tab in a simple way. If you need to use a Teams personal app, so your web part show it as a personal app, there are no way to edit the settings, and then you need to implement the way to load, to save, and to have to UI to edit the settings for the personal app. Another things we talk about in the SharePoint framework, and we talk about how to use SharePoint framework inside Teams. Of course, we have, I think, if you create a SharePoint framework application inside Teams, you need to interact with the SharePoint. There are different ways, but the most useful way is to use the Microsoft Teams SDK. And it's an object that contains inside the SDK property of the SharePoint framework context. And inside this this Microsoft Teams SDK, you can find a lot of property, a lot of methods to interact with Teams. For example, you are able to understand what is the team ID, the channel ID, the locale, what kind of team are applied, the entity ID, the subentity, and the group ID, and so on. It's very interesting if you want to create code that interact with Microsoft Teams. Another thing is the icon of your application. When you scaffold an application on a SharePoint framework solution when you scaffold on a SharePoint framework solution, automatically you have a folder named Teams that contains these two images. Of course, the guide, the first part of the name will be different for every project, but you can maintain the same name, change the image, and then you can use this image inside Teams to identify the personal app or to identify the team tab when you have to add the team tab, the web part as a team tab inside a team. Of course, this is only the thing that you have to implement if you want to expose a web part to SharePoint as a team tab or as a personal app. But if you want to do more, if you want to have more control, you can create your own manifest, Teams manifest for SharePoint framework, and you have to do some process to generate a zip file named Teams SPFx app.zip that will be put inside a Teams folder to inform when you click on the Sync to Teams button inside the app catalog, to inform Teams that you have a specific Teams manifest that you want to apply. So I put the URL of the Microsoft documentation that explain better because we don't have a lot of time to explain better what is the process to create a custom manifest. So I want to show you just an example. This is an example on how to expose a web part, for example, as a messaging extension. To do that, there are no way inside the standard SharePoint framework solution. But you can create a custom Teams manifest. You can put all the information that you want to use to create, for example, the compose extension. And you can put all the comments, and in the URL there are a specific format that you have to use. In this case, the link is cutted, but it's the URL of a specific SharePoint underscore layout page named Teams Logon. You have to put some parameters and basically the ID of the web part that you want to use. In this way, you are able to generate a custom Teams manifest, deploy, and then use a web part as an compose extension. Of course, you can do that to create the meeting app application. Okay. So, I moved the slide in a different point. So, in which way you are able to deploy your SharePoint framework solution as a Teams tab? So, you remember, you need to deploy the solution inside the SharePoint app catalog, and then when you have deployed the application to the SharePoint catalog, you need to remember to mark the flag or share this application to all sites inside SharePoint. This is mandatory. And then the last thing is you need to click on the Files tab I know that recently the app catalog page are completely rebuilt. There are a different UI now, modern UI for the app catalog, but the concept is the same. You need to click on sync to Teams because the SharePoint app catalog needs to read the package, read the manifest or for your SharePoint solution, and then generate or use your custom manifest for SharePoint, generate or use that, and then inform by save this manifest inside the Microsoft Teams catalog. In this way, you can deploy your application, but your application is hosted as a normal SharePoint framework solution inside SharePoint, but is exposed as a different kind of part in Teams as a tab, personal app, and so on. So let me show a simple demo. I want to show you first the result. So this is I want to show here, but come on, I already deployed the application. Later I'll show you the code. So now I'm using the SharePoint workbench, and I have a Teams app web part. This is a standard web part built with the last version of the SharePoint framework. You are able to see that this web part it's the standard scaffold web part. You have some properties. In this case, you have the description field, and then when you change this one, you are able to automatically update the UI of your web part. This web part contains a code that understands if the web part runs inside the SharePoint page or Teams. Later I'll show you. Okay, the same web part deployed as a Teams tab, for example. To do that, you can, I want to remove, and then I'll show you how to add. You click here, because this app is already deployed. You can select the web part that you want to add. Okay, I click save, and then this is the web part hosted as a Teams tab. You are able to see that now I understand that this web part run inside Microsoft Teams, and you have the opportunity to customize the property of the web part in the same way. So basically, you have to click on the menu and then click on settings, and you are able to change the settings. So the same web part hosted as personal app. If I click here, I'm able to see that the web part it's the personal app. You can find the icon here. You can pin the application. You can see the UI of your application and some information about the publisher, the version, and so on. In this case, you don't have the possibility to change the settings. So if you want, I already mentioned this, but if you want to manage your custom settings, you need to implement your own way to read, to save, to show the UI to change the settings. There are no way, the default way to manage the settings for the web part as a personal app. Okay. I want to show just the code. This is the implementation of the Teams app web part, standard way, no custom code implemented. This is the code generated from the Yeoman generator. And you are able to see that you can use Microsoft Teams inside the SDK property of the SharePoint context. There are different, in this case, just one, because I need to add more SDK if I want, but for Teams, there are Microsoft Teams, and then if I click on context, I'm able to access to all properties as context of Teams, or if I click on Teams.js, I'm able to access to the some classes or enumeration that we can use to interact by code to Microsoft Teams. Of course, the Teams manifest contains, the web part manifest contains inside the supported host, SharePoint web part, Teams personal app, Teams tab, and SharePoint full page. If I remove this one and this one, I'll publish this web part just as a Teams personal app and a Teams tab. Of course, if I remove and put only the Teams personal app, this web part will be deployed just on a personal app and stop. Okay, I want to show you go to the admin center of my my tenant. If you go to SharePoint and then more features and click on apps. Okay, this is the modern UI for the application, and you are able to see that the package Team Nation demo it's already packaged, but you need to click on upload, select the package. When you upload, the only thing that you have to do is on add to Teams. In this way, the SharePoint app catalog read all the information from the manifest and then generate an application. Of course, it's already deployed. Sorry for this error, but you're able to see that it's available for SharePoint and Teams. And then at this moment, you can use the app as I already showed you inside Microsoft Teams. Okay, I want to show you just another tab. This is a different SharePoint framework application that use PnP controls. PnP reusable control library contains a lot of controls, React controls that you can use. I created this adaptive cart host control, and in this way, you are able to generate the UI of your web part by using an adaptive cart. So this is just for an example on an sample for use on a complex web part as a Teams tab. You can change the adaptive card that you want to use, and then basically you can create a complex UI by using just a JSON adaptive card. Of course, you can click and then execute some action, and then you have to create the code to manage this action. But basically, it's a way to create a complex UI. And then I want to show you that all the team colors are used inside the UI. So you need to create your web part and then use inside the Teams in a different way. So just a few slides and I'll finish. You don't. You have to remember that with the SharePoint framework, you can create customization for Viva Connection. So Viva Connection is an 1 year old service, and basically from Microsoft. And basically, the Viva Connection is an application for Microsoft Teams that are able to show you some customization specific for Viva Connection, and basically show you on a SharePoint side, for example, your internet as a personal app inside Microsoft. You can use the out-of-the-box or SharePoint framework web part, or you can create a SharePoint framework extension or a specific component optimized for Viva connection. This is an example. The Viva connection dashboard are able to show you some adaptive card extension. It's a new model to create a web part for Viva connection, and then you can put all this customization as a SharePoint framework inside Viva connection. This is just an example. Some cards with different way. You can interact in all Teams clients. The new model is the adaptive card extension, and it's a way to generate a specific component by using adaptive card in the same way as you show you previously. The difference that the adaptive card extension is created by Microsoft, and the adaptive card host control is created by me and then shared with the community. So the last slide. So why did I choose SharePoint framework to develop app for Teams? So there are some points. The first point is I use the SharePoint framework for create customization on multiple services by using the same development model. I don't need to understand different way to create different same application for SharePoint, Teams, or Viva connection. It's the same development model that I can use on multiple services. So another way is the SharePoint framework cover almost the request to create application for Teams as a personal app, team tab, messaging extension, and meetings app. Of course, if you want to create a bot, you don't need to use a SharePoint framework, but almost of the application required are based on UI, standard UI, and then you can create by using SharePoint framework. Another important thing is the hosting. The SharePoint framework solution is hosted by SharePoint. You don't need to have a hosting system different based on Azure or a cloud provider, but you need to deploy your code and then use SharePoint as an host. Of course, the last point, the solution can only be based on the client-side code, JavaScript at the end, but you can integrate with various API. Of course, the Microsoft Graph, the SharePoint Graph, the SDK for Teams, or the third-part external services like your own API or public API, of course, in a secure way. This is very important. So, last slide, it's some references from Microsoft documentation. And the last slide is about me. I'm Fabio Franzini. I'm CEO of AppV Solution. It's a startup with the focus on create customization and product on based on the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And I'm Microsoft MVP on Office development and business application category. So you can find some information like my personal email, the personal website, and the Twitter account, and of course, if you want to keep in touch with me, the LinkedIn account. I'm finished. You don't remember to rate my session, and of course, if you have some questions, I'm here. I'm here for you. Thank you.